Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Pamela Buchbinder and Jake Nolan? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Jake Nolan was the youngest of 3 children. It looks like when he was young, he spent time both on Long Island and in the Miami, Florida area. By the age of 5, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Sometime when he was around 14 or 15, his mood changed drastically. Jake started having mood swings. When his mood was low, he wouldn't get out of bed and missed school frequently. Jake was diagnosed with both depression and anxiety. At the age of 17, he threatened to harm himself using a butcher knife. He was taken to a mental health facility and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. By the time he reached college, he had tried over 30 different medications to treat his symptoms. Sometimes he was taking 5 or 6 drugs at a time. In addition to prescription medication, Jake was taking illegal drugs and drinking alcohol. To address these serious mental health concerns with Jake, he and his parents came up with an unconventional idea to help him. Jake had a cousin named Pamela Buchbinder, who was a psychiatrist in Manhattan. Pamela lived in a $7,000 a month apartment and was taking care of her 4-year-old son, Calder. The plan was for Jake to live part-time with Pamela and take care of her son in exchange for therapy and having her monitor his medications. Now, of course, this is a boundary violation and should have never happened, but from the perspective of Jake and his parents, the plan appeared to be working out well. As all this was going on, Pamela was in a custody dispute with Calder's father, another psychiatrist named Michael Weiss, who also lived and worked in Manhattan. They had a long history of animosity. Both of them had been arrested for offenses against each other, although all the charges were dismissed. Over time, Pamela Buchbinder started to manipulate Jake Nolan. As if the boundary crossing with the therapy wasn't enough, Pamela was crossing other boundaries. She encouraged Jake to form a close relationship with her 4-year-old son, almost as if he was the boy's father. Jake would later say that he loved Calder more than life. Sometimes in the morning, Jake would climb into bed with Pamela and her son as if they were a family. There was no sexual relationship between Jake and Pamela, but the nature of their communication was consistent with people in a romantic relationship. Pamela would call him names like Sweet J and Lovey. She would send Jake text messages which had a romantic connotation. For example, she wrote messages like, "You are remarkable, you are brilliant, you are so beautiful, you are just the most fun person to love." Jake wanted a normal life. He wanted to build a family. Pamela was exploiting this fact to build this fantasy that they were in some type of stable and caring relationship. The second part of Pamela's manipulation plan was to convince Jake that her former lover, Michael Weiss, was a terrible man. She falsely claimed that Michael was harming Calder and failing to pay child support. According to Jake, Pamela started making suggestions about actions that Jake could take against Michael, like injecting him with poison or burning him alive in front of a group of people. I find it curious that she allegedly added the part about being in front of other people with the burning. Would someone who was on fire really be too concerned about whether or not they had an audience? I cannot imagine that having an audience would make it any worse. Eventually, Jake and Pamela came up with a plan for Jake to attack Michael using a sledgehammer without an audience, a private sledgehammer attack. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On November 11, 2012, Jake and Pamela were captured on surveillance video at a Home Depot buying a 10-pound sledgehammer. According to Jake, on the morning of November 12th, he was in bed with Pamela. She was rubbing his back and telling him how much she loved him. He was her savior, the greatest person ever. No one else understood her. She loaded a sledgehammer and a kitchen knife into a duffel bag and then gave Jake a map to Michael's apartment, which is also where Michael worked. Pamela kept talking about how life would be so much better after Michael was terminated. According to Jake, that's the word she used, not dead, but terminated. After this, Jake started his journey to Michael's apartment/office on West 57th Street. He arrived there and walked through the business entrance. He signed in with security using his own name, claiming that he was going to a tutoring center in the building. Jake made his way to the 12th floor and entered Michael's apartment, but Michael was busy with a client. Jake left the apartment and waited in a stairwell until the client left. After Jake re-entered the apartment, he asked Michael for some financial forms related to Calder's school. Ostensibly, this is why he was visiting Michael that day. Jake went into the bathroom. He pulled the knife and the sledgehammer out of the duffel bag. He put the knife in his pocket, and he had the sledgehammer in his hands. After exiting the bathroom, he attacked Michael with the sledgehammer. Michael was able to move out of the way, but the sledgehammer still caught his shoulder a bit. Jake then pulled out the knife and stabbed Michael 7 or 8 times. Michael managed to overpower Jake and get the knife away from him. He stabbed Jake once and made his way into the hallway, screaming for help. A neighbor called 911. Jake and Michael were taken to the hospital. Both of them survived. Jake was arrested and charged with attempted murder. He implicated Pamela in the plot, but not until several weeks after his arrest. Pamela denied any involvement. Jake told several different stories to investigators. He said that he only brought the sledgehammer and the knife with him because he was afraid of Michael. Jake claimed that he did not attack Michael with the sledgehammer, saying it was too heavy for him to swing. In another version of the story, Jake said that Michael was the aggressor. Michael stabbed him with a knife first. In yet another version, Jake claimed that Michael pulled the sledgehammer out of his bag and attacked him with it. How would Michael have known that there was a sledgehammer in the duffel bag? Considering Jake's mental health and the fact that he had supplied multiple versions of the story, prosecutors were concerned about his credibility. This slowed the case against Pamela Buchbinder. In March of 2016, Jake Nolan was found guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. It appeared as though the case might be concluded, like Pamela had escaped justice. But in October of 2017, Pamela Buchbinder was arrested and charged with second-degree attempted murder and first-degree attempted assault. The state believed that she was the mastermind of the attack on Michael. In September of 2022, 52-year-old Pamela Buchbinder pleaded guilty to burglary and assault. She was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Pamela's attorney pointed out that she pleaded guilty to offenses that do not involve attempting to murder someone. So Pamela wasn't admitting to having any intent to kill someone. In a way, I guess the attorney is saying that what Pamela did is not as bad as what people may think. I do not believe this is a great argument in her favor. People plead guilty to offenses all the time when they actually committed some other more serious offenses. That's a central component of the plea bargain. Plus, it's comical to think that Pamela did not want Michael Weiss killed. Like she sent Jake to Michael's apartment with a sledgehammer and a knife just to hurt him, but not to kill him. That would be a little bit more believable if Jake was carrying a plastic toy hammer or something like that, but a 10-pound sledgehammer? It's hard to believe that there was no lethal intent. Did they get confused by choosing Hammer Time as the code name for their operation? Jake would later say that he did actually intend to kill Michael. Was Pamela somehow not aware of this? Like Jake would call her from the scene after attacking Michael and say, "I tried to kill him, but I was not successful." And Pamela would say, "What? You tried to kill him with the sledgehammer and the knife that I told you to bring with you? What were you thinking? That wasn't the plan at all." That's pretty hard to believe. This brings me to item number 2. Was Pamela actually guilty of conspiracy to commit attempted murder? It is possible that Pamela pleaded guilty to something she didn't do in order to avoid trial. She was facing up to 25 years in prison. I think it's pretty clear that Pamela did want Michael Weiss to be murdered. Here are a few reasons I think she's guilty. She was implicated by Jake Nolan, who was definitely guilty by his own admission. She admitted giving him a map of Michael's building. She claimed it was to help take care of Calder. I think it was actually to take care of Michael, but with a different meaning of the words take care. 3 days before the attack, Pamela was named as a beneficiary of a $1.5 million life insurance policy on Michael. There was communication via cell phone between Jake and Pamela before and immediately after the attempted murder, and of course she was captured on video at a Home Depot buying the sledgehammer using cash. What on earth did she need a sledgehammer for? To remodel her apartment? It's more likely she wanted to remodel her former lover. She wanted to give him a whole new look, like Extreme Makeover, No Longer Alive version. Item number 3. From the very beginning, the arrangement with Pamela and Jake was problematic. It was a massive violation of boundaries for Pamela to promise to treat her cousin and to have him live in the same apartment, even part-time. I don't know if Pamela actually followed through with delivering the treatment, but either way, this demonstrates terrible judgment. Jake could pretty much make a good argument that he was mistreated by psychiatrists during his life. When he was younger, he had been given 30 different medications over the course of a few years, as I mentioned, which highlights the guesswork that occurs in psychiatry. And he went to live with a psychiatrist who manipulated him into attempting to kill someone. Item number 4. Did Pamela use her psychotherapeutic skills from her psychiatry training to manipulate Jake? Or was she just a regular narcissist who just happened to be a mental health professional? Here are my thoughts on this. First, a person does not need to have psychotherapeutic skill in order to be manipulative. Most people who manipulate others don't have any formal mental health training. Counseling skills are really not geared toward manipulation anyway. They're designed to help people. Second, even though psychiatrists typically emphasize chemistry more so than psychotherapy, Pamela practiced in Manhattan, which is a completely different market for some mental health professionals. In most areas of the United States, psychiatrists tend to see clients every 2 to 8 weeks for 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the setting. Mental health counselors and other professionals that focus on psychotherapy tend to see each client for about an hour a week. In Manhattan, the situation is a little different, especially for psychotherapists who treat wealthy clients. A disproportionately high number of these psychotherapists, regardless of their specific profession, have a few tendencies which deviate from the rest of the country. For example, they tend to emphasize individual psychotherapy, often with a modality like psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theory. They tend to treat the same client several times in a week, and they often have sessions which are longer in duration, like well over an hour. So back to the original question, did Pamela use her mental health training to manipulate Jake? She certainly could have, because she probably had a lot of experience delivering psychotherapy. However, her tactics really didn't seem that complex. My guess would be that she really didn't need to use her mental health knowledge to manipulate Jake, but she probably used it to select Jake in the first place, like to set up a situation where she could get power over him. Pamela would have understood the nature of bipolar disorder. She knew that Jake was probably impulsive, erratic, and could commit a lot of energy to specific, bizarre ideas, like attacking somebody with a sledgehammer for no good reason. Moving to item number 5. In this case, Jake Nolan was both a victim and a perpetrator. I think it's particularly unfair that the sentence that Jake received was anywhere close to what Pamela received. Jake trusted Pamela to take care of him, to lead him in the right direction. She knew that he was vulnerable, and she took advantage of the circumstances. Pamela was aware that when Jake was caught, people would doubt his credibility because he had bipolar disorder. She was right. The state had so much doubt, it delayed the case against Pamela for years and entered into a plea bargain which allowed her to escape the most severe consequences. Now moving to my final thoughts. How well mental health clinicians maintain boundaries is an important metric to evaluate their competency. Whenever a clinician of any type is willing to violate boundaries, it's better to avoid them. If a clinician's personal feelings, desires, bad habits, and destructive tendencies can cross over into their therapeutic work, the service they are delivering no longer counts as therapy. Those are my thoughts in the case of Pamela Buchbinder and Jake Nolan. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be as intriguing as a homicidal version of Hammer Time. Thanks for watching.